Hello, everyone. Art Burns here, wishing you well today. So yesterday I talked about compassion and how important compassion is, especially with the ability to make connections to others and get ourselves out of what I talked about as the me-centered universe, right? When we practice compassion, we practice connection, we develop connection to others, and that helps us to, kind of not make everything about ourselves, right? And this is intrinsically important to the way that compassion exercises can reduce the stress in our bodies and the stress that we feel in our lives, right? So today I want to talk about something that might at first glance seem a little paradoxical to that notion, which is self-compassion, right? Now, it's interesting. There's a very distinct difference between self compassion and self esteem, right? Now, for years and years and years, psychologists have promoted the idea of self esteem, right? And to build self esteem is something that's a positive thing. But more recently, they've shown that actually self esteem is kind of closer to that whole me centered universe, right? That the idea of self esteem or the practice of building up self esteem can often lead to things like narcissism. It can lead to like a contingent sense of self-worth, meaning that you're only worth it if you're doing well, if you're living up to these expectations you put on yourself. And it can also lead to a sense of vulnerability and anger towards people who threaten your ego and your sense of self-esteem, which is actually bringing you back to the stress response, right? So when we talk about self-compassion, we talk about something a little bit different from that. And modern, recent science and research shows that self-compassion is much more beneficial to us than the idea of self-esteem, right? In terms of it builds emotional resilience, it builds a sense of connectedness to others, it establishes a self-worth, and through that, like a true intrinsic self-worth rather than a contingent self-worth, right? Like the idea that we're worthy of the care that we give ourselves. It also is shown to just have the very basic, basis of happiness. Like people who practice self-compassion are happier, and that's often what I tell people is the best, guard against stress is happiness, right? Because if you're happy, it's very hard to be afraid at the same time. And when you're afraid is when you're going to come into the stress response. And by the way, modern research also shows that self-compassion is very clearly associated with the relief of things like depression and anxiety and ultimately stress as well, right? So therefore, as you can see, like the correlation between self-compassion and compassion is very strong. And the reason I bring it up today is because, as I talked about yesterday, compassion is very, very important to relieving stress and to building that connection to just feeling like you're connected with the rest of the world, which is really good, not only with stress, but also psychologically, right? It tends to get us out of this mode of selfing, right? And thinking of, diminishing our self-worth, right? And so, but here's the thing, right? This is not something that is a new concept. I mean, poets and spiritual people have been talking about this for years, I mean, centuries, right? That if we don't love ourselves, right, it's really hard to love someone else, right? And that's kind of the idea of self-compassion, is that through developing self-compassion, what we do is we put ourselves into a place where we can make ourselves more available to practicing compassion towards others, right? And so that's why it's very, very important when you're getting started in a compassion exercise. It's very, very important, might be the not a good word to use, but really it's very helpful and beneficial to start with self-compassion. Right now, there's a few different ways to develop self-compassion. There's actually many, many ways to develop self-compassion, and the ones that I prescribe to, that kind of fit in with mindfulness practices, right? There's two really important ones that were really very helpful ones that I like to talk about. The one is sort of, it's almost like a reprogramming, which is the same way that I actually suggest to practice compassion as well. You're simply, repeating phrases of compassion. When you're practicing compassion towards others, what we do traditionally is we pick three different people, right? We pick one person who is very close to us, very, represents nothing but positive emotions, right? Someone who you think about, you just think love, and you just love them. It's very easy to show them compassion. And then you turn to someone who's neutral in your life, right? So, just someone you see on the train in the morning, or someone who works in a store that you go to a lot, or, a neighbor down the street who you haven't really met yet, and then you wish them the same phrases of compassion. And then you pick a person who is difficult to offer compassion towards, right? Someone who is, represents a challenge in your life, someone who kind of rubs you the wrong way, gets up your sleeve a little, just someone who is, just difficult for you, somebody who has done you wrong, right? And so the way I like to approach this sort of process of learning how to practice compassion with my clients is, for the first couple of weeks, don't think about those other people. Think about yourself, right? And oftentimes it helps to think of ourselves as, a younger version of ourselves, right? Someone who we can look at, who, we saw that, a time in our life where we were having a little bit of a hard time, or things that were, it was a difficult time, or it was something that, people mistreated us, right? Like, think of yourself there, right, in that moment, and repeat those phrases of loving kindness to you. And the phrases are quite simple. It's just about saying, the ones that I use, and these are mine, and you're more than welcome to have them. But but what I do is I encourage people to kind of, over time, develop your own phrases. There are traditional phrases that are that are out there, but the ones that I've come up with are, may I be well, may I be free from suffering, may I be free from fear and insecurity, may I be forgiven for my mistakes and my misdeeds, may I feel loved, may I be happy. Just simply like that, over and over and over and over again, right? And another really effective way to consider this as you're doing these phrases: treat yourself like you would treat a friend, right? And this is a really important thing with developing self-compassion. And this is something that is, or again, important might not be the right word, but certainly powerful. It definitely fits, right? Like, a very powerful way to practice self-compassion is for you to talk to yourself as though you were talking to a good friend, and not just a good friend, who's doing great in their life, and having a great time, and everything's going well. They got a great job, they got a great family, everything on the outside looks awesome, right? You can use that person, but look at that part of them that you don't see, right? Like, look at the part of them that is just like you, that when they lie down on the pillow at night, they have concerns about themselves. They have feelings of insecurity. They have fears. They have feelings of lack of self-worth, right? Or you can even take this a step further and kind of picture talking to a friend who's going through a really hard time, right? Someone who's just had a terrible loss in their life. They've lost a job, lost a family member, a pet, or something like that. Somebody who's really hurting, right? Like, how would you talk to that person, right? Talk to yourself like that. Right now the thing is that a lot of times with compassion exercises and self-compassion exercises, maybe even more so, as we repeat these phrases to ourselves, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get into our subconscious, right? Because that's the part of your, the mental chatter that's kind of always, kind of judging ourselves and criticizing ourselves and holding ourselves up against the highest possible, standards, right? Like we're not hard on anyone like we're hard on ourselves, right? And that's universal, right? And it's also important, and as I really try to really very, very deliberately, intentionally, and clearly, explain over and over and over to my clients, is that, and I want you to know this too, is that, it is absolutely normal and universally true that we all, as human beings, have a tendency to criticize ourselves and to hold ourselves to these higher standards and to judge ourselves. That's not just you. It's not just you. It's not just me. It's not just any one of the dozens and dozens of clients I've helped over the last couple of years. It's true about everyone. right? And the more that we can, and this is especially true again about parents. I talk a lot about parents here because parents are people who I love to help, because because the more we can develop mindfulness and especially compassion, in parenting, this is a real game changer for connecting and enabling and facilitating the emotional development of your children, right? The more you can do this, and now again, parents are one of when I think about my life as a parent and I think about what other parents go through, the level of shame and self-judgment we can sometimes go through is just enormous, right? And it's not fair to ourselves, and it's also not serving ourselves. A lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes I talk to people and I try to talk to them about self-compassion, and they say, well, that judgment that I put on myself, that's what, motivates me. That's what, inspires me, and that's what gets me going, And I understand that on an instinctual level, right? But I have to be honest with you. The research is quite clear in the opposite direction. Quite clear in the complete opposite direction. That people who are kind to themselves, they get more done. They are more effective. They are more effective in whatever they're doing, whether that's parenting or in a career or as just a citizen in the world, right? You are more effective. You are more efficient, effective, and more just present as what you're trying to be if you're kind to yourself. Okay, and again, this is not a spiritual woo woo airy fairy hippy dippy kind of idea. This is hard nosed neuroscience, right? This is like, studies have been done, and I would be happy to send you some links if you need to see them. Let me know. But the evidence couldn't be more clear that it is absolutely not true that the harder we on ourselves, the more we're going to accomplish, or the better that's going to be for us on any level. It's completely false. And so so when I'm talking to people, sorry, I got digressed there a little bit. As soon as I talk about parents, everything goes off the line, because I really do care about parents, because I know how hard it is, and I know how much we are, we do tend to really, really judge ourselves as parents, and we feel a lot of guilt and a lot of shame through that process. And that's exactly what the self-compassion exercises are there to address. Right now what I was going to say, or what I started to say, is that the idea of repeating these phrases, what we're trying to do is we're trying to change that subconscious mental chatter that's always there in our ears, like always telling us, oh, you screwed up again, oh, you didn't do that right, oh, you shouldn't have had that other cookie, or oh, you should have gotten up earlier today, you should have done this, you didn't send that email, blah 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 blah, all day every day, right? We all have it, right? To varying degrees, but some of us have it more than others, obviously, but that's there, right? And so what self-compassion is trying to do is trying to change that voice, right? Not to get rid of it, right? That's you can't do that, right? If you try to get, like I tell all my clients, if I tell you right now to don't think about a monkey, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Everyone watching here is saying a monkey. I know it. And so to say, oh, shush, that voice, that's not going to work. It's only going to get louder there. So what we're doing is we're changing that voice. And instead of saying, oh, you should have sent that email today, or you should have woken up earlier, or you shouldn't have had that other that coffee or that cookie or whatever, instead we're changing it to say, it's okay that you had that cookie. You were hungry. You've had a rough day. It's okay that you took a little extra sleep this morning because you needed it. But understand that now that you've had that sleep, let's try to do the best that we can. But I know you're doing the best that you can, and that's all that you can ever do. That's the idea, right? And once we can do that, what happens is we send that email. We don't have that cookie. We do the things that we're more likely to accomplish those things. That's what I mean, right? Like we become more effective through that process. And so in the process of practicing this and changing and kind of reprogramming that, all we're doing is repeating these phrases to ourselves over and over and over and over and over. It gets boring, folks. It feels mechanical. It feels like this is not what this is supposed to feel like, but the fact of the matter is that it works. right? And that's all that, and that's why, as a coach, that's what I do for my clients, right? I let them know, like, just keep up with it, just keep doing it, and don't worry about the effects, don't worry about the goals, don't worry about the striving towards something. Just do it right now. Just keep doing it in this present moment, and you'll be amazed. And 10 times out of 10, in a couple of weeks, people come back to me and say, gosh, now I understand how important it is to do that practice. I swear. I mean, everyone comes back to me and says that. So thanks for listening to me. I really, this is really important stuff. So if you would like to know more about these practices, it is pretty much as simple as I just explained, but it's important to do it in a correct way. So it's important to get into a very present and emotionally engaged state before you do these, repeat these phrases to yourself. So a lot of it has to do with meditation, and I can teach you how to do that. Even if you've never meditated before, it's really one of the things that I pride myself on, is the ability to demystify some of the things about meditation and make it more inviting, make it more welcoming. So if you're interested in that, and if you'd like to learn more, please drop a comment, send a message, get in touch with me. Let's get into conversation, okay? Because it might be a lot easier and a lot more attainable than you think it is right now. So let me change your mind. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'll be back again tomorrow, and I wish you well. Take care.